In the time it takes to finish one stiff drink, my special guest Noel March and I will discuss the negative side of being in law enforcement. We'll swap some stories about the challenges involved in the profession, and we'll find out once and for all if a stiff alcoholic beverage makes you better at the Rubik Cube. So stick around for this episode of The Boondock Perspective.
Where class is optional.
It's yet another carefree day in Maine, and you're listening to The Boondock Perspective, the show that not only loves unique perspectives, but fully embraces them. Here with me this week is Noel March. He's served in law enforcement for 40 years at the local, county, state, and federal levels, most notably as the 39th United States Marshal. Noel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ethan. It's great to be here.
We've been trying to make this happen for a while.
We just keep getting rescheduled, and life gets in the way.
Because originally I was going to ask you to be on the first season,
right?
But I don't think I was established enough to fully ask you.
Nor did I know you well enough to say yes.
Yeah. But I think that once I got the first season under wraps, I think this was going to happen. This was something that I'm happy has happened.
Well, I'm looking forward to it as well.
When we're not completely I've rescheduled on you, you've rescheduled on me, right? Yeah. We're gonna make a good episode for everybody. So for everybody at home, I kind of want to do a really good introduction for you. So why don't you kind of tell everybody a little bit of backstory on yourself, where you came from, how you came to be in the profession that you're in.
Ethan, was many, many years ago, and I felt the calling, and I call it that, the calling to police service. The role of being the person that is called upon when someone is afraid, vulnerable, or in a place in their lives when they need help, and they call that number that asks a police officer to come. I thought that was a fit for what my interests were in helping others. I kind of sensed that from about age 12, I guess. But, when it came time to choose a profession, I was 20 years old. I was entirely too young. Now that I look back, I never would have hired me. I often say that. But it's been nearly 40 years now.
How do you get that calling as a 12-year-old?
Well,
were you just policing people on their trikes?
No. It's interesting. Maybe it was a lifelong thing. I was, a crossing guard in grade school and watched those television shows like Adam 12 and Highway Patrol and Chips and all of those, And anyway, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think, about the influence of television on our choices and our perspectives in life. But I met a police officer from Maine, a police officer in Maine who made such an impression on me that I call him my first mentor, and it began there. So quite often someone will make an impression on us that sets, sometimes in stone, what our future will be as we grow up.
I mean, that's definitely true. Obviously, I'm not a police officer or anything, but the calling definitely came from me and what I do. I think I was in 7th grade when I picked up my first video camera, and it was like, oh, I was meant to do this. I was meant to hold a video camera, and I was meant to edit videos and storytell through the visual medium.
Were the AV kid in high school? And
yeah, I was. We didn't have a stellar AV program, but everything we had, I mean, even if it was outdated, it was still really fun, really entertaining, and it was something that I was very passionate about.
Sure.
But I've always been passionate since a very young age. 4, I think, is my earliest memory, just writing crappy stories and just slowly honing that skill into the visual medium. So I can relate with having a calling, but definitely can't relate with how intense that calling is.
Well, it doesn't happen that way for everyone. I mean, how many of our friends or family members do we know that go through school or even college or university and change what they do or what their interests or goals are? And I have friends and family that are still trying to figure out what they're going to do when they grow up, and they're older than I am.
Yeah, there's something nice about that, though. That freedom forever. There's something kind of nice about that.
Well, I've changed jobs, so my freedom comes with. My wife sometimes says I have a buffet of a career because I've worked in the local, county, state, and federal levels of law enforcement, not staying with one particular police agency for 25 years and getting a gold watch and a retirement at the end. But about every 5 to 8 or so years, I'll make a change. And I look for the next challenge and the next place to serve. So that has been the case for me, and most recently finishing up as United States Marshal here in Maine. The 39th United States Marshal. Now, let me explain that, how that works a little bit. It's really.
I was confused when you tried explaining it to me, so this is good.
I was confused when I first learned about the history of the United States Marshal. Now, we often hear about or watch John Wayne or Tommy Lee Jones, depict in television and movies, the United States Marshals of the Old West, and indeed, Virgil and Wyatt Earp. The OK Corral, those are United States Marshals bringing justice to the Old West, and Bat Masterson, and these are true life stories of real United States Marshals. George Washington, our first president, was the first president to appoint a United States Marshal. Now, this position is a presidential appointment, and it's confirmed by the Senate, and it has been that way since 1789. So the first United States Marshal was Colonial Colonel Henry Dearborn here in Maine, and the 39th was Noel March. Today it's Ted Short, the 40th United States Marshal. But it's always a president that makes that appointment. Now understand that there are over 4,000 deputy United States Marshals. Those are career federal agents who do work that 25 years for the Gold Watch and serve in those roles, catching fugitives, protecting judges, running the witness protection program, seizing assets of criminal enterprise, and then holding these auctions of luxury automobiles and yachts and real estate, and turning that money back into the pockets of crime victims. So, it's a very storied, it's a long history. Here in Maine, the U.S. Marshals protect our judges. We hunt down those fugitives, whether they come from Maine or elsewhere in the United States. And it's a national organization. It's a national police agency, the oldest in America at the federal level. I was very honored to serve for 8 years, from 2010 till 2018.
You're a friggin' poet, dude. You're a poet. Well, we'll continue the conversation on this in a second. But first, we have to figure out if one stiff drink of alcohol makes you better at the Rubik's Cube.
Well, how do we do that?
So actually, you've had a lot of discipline, and I'm not gonna toot my own horn here, but one thing I was always disappointed in having never known was how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I picked them up several times in my life.
The Rubik's Cube.
Rubik's. Anyway, I was at Walmart a couple months ago, and I saw one on the shelf, and I said, "All right, hey, I'm gonna learn this."
Are they even solvable?
They are. I learned it in 5 days.
On YouTube?
5 days in just 5 days, I was able to solve it in under 2 minutes.
Well, I would normally say, hold my beer and watch this, but I'm not sure that we're going to have a.
So I'll give you a minute.
Success here. I'm just.
See if you can get as far as you can. See if you can get.
I am clear of mind. I am.
This thrilling television was had by all.
Well, listen, this is riveting. I know this is riveting for the viewers at home,
especially our audio listeners.
Right. So you can't see what I'm doing here, but I'm trying to match the red squares, and the red squares are found on all 6 sides of this Rubik's Cube. I am a man of patience, Ethan, typically. So, this is difficult to do, but I am matching up some of the oranges and some of the yellows and some of the green. I'm making some progress. Oh, there's 5 red. So I'm making some progress, and I'm feeling much better about myself. So there it is. I'm going to challenge you to tackle this yourself.
So 5?
Okay, 5 reds.
Yeah, let me see
5 reds.
I don't know if I can even do this.
5 yellows.
So that's what's happening is I have to do this now?
Yeah, you have to spin them around,
going to do
right and left, forward and backwards, up and down. You're going much faster than I am. You're likely much younger than I am.
Yeah, we have a friend at work that does this, and he's blowing my mind because I don't quite know how to accurately hold the thing yet.
Viewers, if you have a Rubik's Cube at home, we encourage you to take that out of the toy box or out of the cat box. And
it is solvable.
Well, listen, now, Ethan, you're making tremendous progress, and I'm feeling somewhat embarrassed. Not to the degree of humiliation yet, but
I have evidence that I can solve this. I'm going to send this to everybody I know. Because one thing I haven't done is record myself doing it yet.
Well, I'm a witness.
I'm sure I can't beat it. Somebody just broke the world record with their feet.
With their feet?
With their feet.
Right, so they're unemployed, and generally have a fair amount of time on their hands. You must as well, because I have to report for the listeners that already one side is all white, another is 8 yellows, another is 8 reds.
I should have been timing myself.
This is intimidating. I said it out loud for dozens of listeners.
I'm surprised you think we have dozens. That's very kind of you.
I'm just going to have a sip of my drink here, Ethan.
There you go.
For God's sakes, and you didn't even say hold my beer and watch this.
Didn't even say hold my beer.
Congratulations. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I picked it up in Walmart, had never held one, and then using just online tutorials, I could solve it in under 2 minutes in 5 days.
I don't know what to make of this. If it's your right brain, your left brain.
Like,
if
I've
you've been
always
studying,
whenever I want to accomplish a task, I've always just gone at it.
Right.
Until I can figure it out. And I think that's one of the reasons like this podcast still exists. You know, and it's one of the reasons why every avenue of my life is like I'm just persistent with what I do and hoping for the best.
Sure.
But
well, solving problems and solving puzzles and figuring out the clues that fit together are all things that Rubik's Cube and law enforcement have in common. And sometimes it feels like a futile task. That is also something that the Rubik's Cube and the profession of law enforcement have in common. But what are you interested in for tonight's episode of?
Yeah, I really want to talk about the downside of being a cop, right? Because we hear all the stories on social media and the television and the newspaper outlets telling us, how difficult it is to be a cop. But I want to hear it from you, right? And there's a lot of things that people don't consider in policing. So I'm just looking to see if I can get a little bit of your feedback on, what you think of what's happening in the world today and what you're seeing in the industry. Industry? Is that the right word?
Sure, we can say the industry. It's ever changing, isn't it? And like so many professions and so many trends and fads even that come and go, support for, popularity of, criticism of, and the perspective and perception of our men and women who serve in law enforcement changes as well over the years. And I've had the benefit of here nearly 40 years to witness that. And, Ethan, it still remains the passion and the calling for me after all this time. Yeah. I'll start with that.
In 2019, this is still your passion.
It still is my passion. I think that most people would agree. Listen, there have been bad experiences that good people have had with authority figures their entire lives. Whether it's their teacher in school, whether it's their parents, whether it's the coach or a police officer. We're in the business of telling people what to do and what not to do. And I have not yet met a human who really enjoys being told what to do or told what not to do on a full-time basis. And unfortunately, when we maybe unfortunately, but realistically, when we have a society where we're expected to live peaceably, not peacefully, that's unrealistic, we're humans, but peaceably among one another, respecting one another's rights and property and personhood, the people that we pay to give full-time attention to those responsibilities, which belong to every one of us, are the police. And these guardians, not warriors, these guardians of society and of our safety and of our families and of our rights and freedoms, they take it on the chin quite often and don't think they don't feel it. I have trained and hired and supervised and been one of the ranks of some 650,000 law enforcement officers in this country. And I can tell you that it has taken its toll. And so often the sort of the scars of that are not seen visibly. And the culture of this profession does not allow us typically to show those scars of what it takes, the toll that it takes. And
I feel like I need to preface, right? Sure. I need to just say this out loud. Like, obviously, we are not talking about those few bad eggs. Right. With that out loud being said.
Thanks for saying that.
I'd like to continue.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because quite often what sticks out in our mind is that one rotten teacher or that one rotten priest or that one rotten police officer, whatever that interaction was, or what you read on the front page of the paper. But today, on August 15th in Philadelphia, 6 police officers were shot. They were shot while they're trying to execute a warrant on a very, very dangerous alleged drug trafficker. It was a narcotics arrest warrant signed by, and search warrant signed by a judge, and they were doing their job for us. And the bullets started flying. And the neighborhood, if you tune into any of this on social media, the neighborhood, of course, with today's iPhones and Samsung, all the different ways to record, have the screaming taunts and criticisms of the public, this standing there on street corners, yelling at the police to stop what they're doing and get out of here. But gosh, all the gunfire was coming from the person they were seeking to arrest. Mm-hmm. And he even had police officers trapped and barricaded. It was a very tough day in Philadelphia today. None of those officers, fortunately, were killed. But here's one of the things that we have on our minds. Last year, for example, in 2018, 144 police officers in America lost their lives doing their job. 144, that's about 1 every 60 hours. Now, sometimes I'm asked by a member of the public who was stopped by a police officer, gosh, that police officer was mean. He was brusque and rude, and he didn't have to. I'm not a criminal. Everyone knows that. But when that officer stopped me, and he wasn't smiling, typically but he wasn't smiling, and I think he had his hand near his gun, and I didn't think that his demeanor was appropriate. Well, here's the thing. I just mentioned that about every 60 hours, one of us loses our life in this profession of service to others, this calling of service to guard and protect others. And we know it. And we don't know the car we're stopping. We don't know who's in the car we're stopping. We don't know what's about to happen in this interaction. Now, the motorist, for example, whether it's 2 p.m. or 2 a.m, they know perfectly well what's going to happen, mm-hmm. how they're going to act, behave, and how they're apt to react. Now, the officer doesn't know that. And I'll say something else, too, about something as simple as a traffic stop. Have you ever seen on television, most of the American public gets their view and perspective of policing, most of them, from television, whether it's CSI this, NCI that, 911, true stories, forensic files, cops, bad boys. And if you're fortunate to know someone who's called to this profession, and so you actually know the what makes someone tick in this job and what they have to say about it. Typically, people don't. Their experience comes from their interaction with the police. Now, the police officer will walk up to that car and quite often, the way officers are trained, will then check the trunk of the car to see if the trunk is loose, if someone's hiding in the trunk to jump out to ambush them. They will check that trunk lid and at the same time put their fingerprints on the back left section of the trunk lid. Then they speak to the operator of the car. And Ethan, I don't know another profession that requires the employee to put their fingerprints on a car in the event that they're about to be murdered, because that will connect that officer with that car for investigators who later come along to hopefully solve the murder of a police officer. And that weighs on their heads and their hearts and their minds. We continue to recruit the men and women of law enforcement from the human race to this very day. And every single time we hire humans, every single time, with human failings and human feelings. And to walk in that officer's shoes, understand that something as simple as stopping a car for speeding in the mind of the motorist is often embarrassment or stress or sometimes confusion, outrage, sometimes humiliation or acceptance, a number of feelings. Every single time for the officer, it's fear. It's fear. And the big, strong, trained men and women in law enforcement with enough equipment on their belt to take out a small platoon single-handedly, they still have those feelings inside of, am I going to go home because I have 3 children and a soccer game tomorrow morning that I'm expected to be the ref for or cheering for my son or daughter for. And this is part and parcel of today, 2019, why we're having a difficult time getting applicants, getting people to apply for the position of police officer. The stress is greater, the scrutiny is greater, the second guessing, the Monday morning quarterbacking, and the lawsuits and complaints are greater than ever before.
So you're seeing a lack of interest in the job. Are you also seeing people who have had the same passion as you leaving?
I've seen both of those things. Ethan, we've seen people who have the passion to enter the profession, but the reluctance to jump all in and put up with and accept the criticism, critique, the stress of the job today. That really wasn't the case. And I can say this because I've been doing this job for this length of time. That really wasn't the case 40 years ago. Employment is strong right now in our country and in our state here of Maine. There are more jobs in this country than there are people to fill them, of every stripe, of every different type of job, every different type of person. And it really takes something to get a person who possesses that spirit of service, not just the spirit of adventure. We have plenty of action heroes in law enforcement, and they're not all G.I. Joe commandos. And we don't want to have all commandos. We need all kinds of people. We need men and women, young and old, of all different education and experience and life skills to come into this profession of public service as guardians of one another. But boy, the applicants today both are unqualified in many cases, or few indeed. When we have openings, they're locally here. We're in the Bangor, Maine area. We're of the state of Maine. Both Bangor Police and the state police have numerous vacancies. They are unable to fill, try as they may. New strategies, new approaches, new recruitment, publicity, advertising, marketing, trying to seek out new markets. And they're doing it,
And Bangor is one of the most desirable places to be a police officer.
Bangor is a great place to be a police officer.
If we're seeing that struggle,
we're seeing that
everyone's got to be feeling that struggle.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
Nationwide, that's a struggle. There are federal grants being offered to police agencies and other jurisdictions across this country to come up with creative approaches. How can we attract men and women into this profession that are suitable for this profession and have what it takes and the resiliency to stick it out? What you said a moment ago about maybe even keeping officers in the profession because of today's stresses is true indeed. Not only are we having a difficult time in keeping our ranks filled with new recruits and new trainees to get out there on that job, but keeping those who have tremendous experience and tremendous skills and knowledge to stay with us. I've seen more and more of our officers say, "Uncle, I've had enough, and I'm going to find a job elsewhere outside of this thankless, seemingly, listen, police today need to be guidance counselors and marriage counselors. They need to be a priest. They need to be a dog catcher. They need to be a drug identification expert. They need to be sensitive to all walks of life, emotionally disturbed individuals, people from countries all over the world, those with who are gender fluid, and those who are well-employed and unemployed. And so the social network, we could say law enforcement officer. We've said that here several times. The amount of time a police officer spends enforcing the law is about 30%. 70% is addressing social disorder issues. I've had so many officers come to me frustrated, throw their hat on the table and on the desk, say, "Geez, Chief, or geez, Marshal, I didn't sign up for this job to be a social worker." And my answer to them is, then you didn't read the job description, did you? Because society's work is social work. And whether you're a teacher or a member of clergy or a law enforcement, it's all society's work. And you're going to face that in this profession. Wow. So now more than ever, Ethan, now more than ever, we need good men and women. We need good people in these roles. I'm very impressed with our Bangor Police Department here locally. They do have good men and women. They've got some great men and women. And our Maine State Police has a whole new generation, really, of young troopers that care about the state of Maine. But I want to give you some good news. want to give you some good news because I'm talking about the stresses and so forth, number of officers killed and so forth. But I want to give you some good news. You're familiar with U.S. News and World Reports. It's a magazine. It's been around for decades. Quite often, they will publish lists, best colleges to attend, best sports program, research programs, scholarships, universities. That's where I became really aware of U.S. News and World Reports. In one of my positions of this buffet of a career that I've had in law enforcement, I'm the former police chief for the University of Maine. Go Blue. And I would know that U.S. News and World Reports would rank the University of Maine in one category or another. They went on to then rank best state to retire, best city, where your money goes farthest, where the employment is, where best climate, all these lists across America. It was last year, 2018, in February, that U.S. News and World Reports published the first ever list, the states of America, the states of the United States, safest through least safe, 1 through 50. And their categories were everything from incarceration rates to crime prevention programming, drugs, and all different issues, and calls for service, and there's quite a metrics of number of ingredients. Now, I'll tell you what, the thing I'm most pleased with is to see of 1 through 50. I think New Mexico was 50th worst state for crime. Can you guess what number 1 was? Or
is this a trick question? Because I feel like it's Maine.
I probably should have asked you, do you think you know where Maine came in on that list? And I will tell you the answer is number 1.
Oh, yeah.
Number 1 safest of all 50 in America. And that's something of which we can all be proud.
Excellent. I hate to be the guy to interrupt the conversation for something as shallow as a sponsorship, but I got to throw out a sponsorship. But I'm actually very proud to sponsor this one. He's a very good friend of mine, very talented, and I can't wait to see what else he comes with. But in the meantime, check this out. If you're a gearhead who lives and breathes cars, or if you just generally love the sound and smell of an engine, then you owe it to yourself to check out the energetically fueled fun of Wicked Motor Network. Wicked Motor Network is a video production agency serving the automotive industry, filming anything from exotic car rallies featuring million-dollar cars, entertaining and collaborative cross-country road trips, and high-performance racing machines speeding around professional racetracks. Wicked Motor Network believes that the relationship between man and car is special, and it proves that every time it films for an automotive event, business, collector, or enthusiast. Check out Wicked Motor Network on Facebook and enter the cinematic world of the auto community. Jumping back into this very serious topic right off the bat. Sure. You said that every year 144 officers are killed in the line of duty?
Well, the number changes. Last year, 2018, it was 144. Sometimes more. This has been a kind of a low year, 2018. Hopefully it'll be lower in 2019.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I see. I'm reading the years backwards. Yeah.
Right.
I'm a year ahead.
Yep.
So if it's 144 killed in the line of duty.
That's right.
You'd sent me an article when we were preparing for this podcast about about a larger number that's more important. Maybe not more important, but I'd say more important.
Well, it is. It's equally as important, and it's a number that isn't publicized, but fortunately is getting more and more attention and intervention than ever before. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Ethan, because for the past 3 years, full 12-month years, 2018, 2017, and 2016, the leading cause of death of law enforcement officers in America has been suicide. We've lost more officers to their own hand and their own decision than we have in the line of duty. And that's not a number that anybody is proud of. It's a number that's a little bit shocking to most who hear it because it isn't publicized. But if we're not concerned about that and willing to support looking out for the guardians who guard us and helping to get our arms around those men and women who are facing these struggles and stresses. Our service members who are doing a magnificent job and are asked to do a tremendous service in the interests of democracy and freedom in our United States military, our armed forces who are deployed overseas, so many of the men and women who return home to their families and jobs and lives are also returning home with post-traumatic stress. And for the longest time, post-traumatic stress has been part of the first responder community, and that includes not just police, but fire and EMS as well. They see things that most of us don't see, and they see things that cannot be unseen. They carry that with them, whether it's children who have been harmed, sometimes viciously, or pain and suffering that our first responders are unable to save, prevent, or rescue innocent victims from. It takes its toll. And I mentioned earlier in the show the fear. The fear comes with this job. And the amount of energy that it takes to maintain your composure and not succumb to fear, it's very similar to what we ask of our military personnel when they're facing harm and they're in a place that others would fear to go. Angels tread. And so that's an important issue, and I want to give the good news around that there are allies and professionals that are circling the wagons along with the law enforcement associations, unions, police leadership, and chief associations around officer wellness and police officer resiliency to take away that stigma that you have to be tough and strong and the Lone Ranger with your own fear and pain. And these officers who will go home every day or every night and not share what they saw with a loved one or what they're feeling or experienced with a professional or a trusted colleague or family member are missing the boat. They're missing the boat on an opportunity to depressurize and to seek and obtain love and understanding, if not empathy, certainly sympathy. These are important human responses and human conditions that, listen, we see it now with our military, and we should absolutely not ignore or overlook the needs of our first responders when it comes to their own emotional and physical, psychological well-being, because we know we need them. We need them in the front line. You know, in 1829, Sir Robert Peel in London, he was a member of Parliament, 1829. He was the leader that created the first organized police department in the world, the London Metropolitan Police. Robert Peel, also known as Bobby Peel, it's after him that the London Bobbies are named. And those Bobbies were created in 1829 by Sir Robert Peel and Parliament. And Sir Robert Peel authored 9 principles. One of those principles is this: the police are the public, and the public are the police. The police are only those members of the public who we pay to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent upon every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence. So you see, the police, Ethan, are not the faucet that controls the flow of crime. They are merely those experts, those specialists that help to advise us. It's a lot like being a doctor. So the doctor doesn't keep you healthy or the viewers healthy or the listeners healthy. The doctor gives us good advice about prevention mostly. Wear your seatbelt, don't drink too much, don't smoke, get some exercise, be careful on what you're eating. And when it matters most, you can call upon your doctor if you have good, trusting relationship with your doctor. You can call upon your doctor and say, I think something's going wrong, will you come help me? And the doctor has specialists. The police have specialists, whether it's in forensics or child issues, youth, juvenile, drugs, game wardens and wildlife and motor vehicle enforcement, all these specialists that can come help our society maintain order and peace and civility. Our police are much like our doctors in that respect. You can't count on them to keep us safe. Listen, look at Maine. How many towns in Maine? There are about 400 municipalities among 16 counties in the state of Maine. 1.3 million people, give or take, for population. Of those 400 municipalities, only 110 have a police department. The other 290 don't. And they're counting on the sheriff's department. They're counting on the state police for their protection. And quite often, the state police car or the sheriff's deputy's car are not in town. The absence of police does not invite a surge in crime. We know that. And the presence of police, like Bangor and Portland and Lewiston, the presence doesn't prevent crime. It happens in society. We look to our police not to be the faucet that controls it, but to be the advisors to help us understand how to keep ourselves, our neighbors, our teammates, our classmates, our roommates, our co-workers, our schools and churches safe. But it's our responsibility, just as Sir Robert Peel said in 1829. We, the public, are the police, and the police come from the public. We're all in this together. And that's the message that I want to say. And it's tough. It's tough on these men and women. It's tougher than ever. And not just since Ferguson or since Columbine and since Baltimore. And it's interesting, isn't it? I can name towns and cities just by name.
And I know what you're talking about.
And you know what I'm talking about. Columbine used to be a pretty wildflower. And Virginia Tech used to be a school that was
I was
first
in
known.
Virginia when that happened.
You were.
Yeah, we were on vacation. I was in an RV.
And that hits the hits the news.
I don't know how close I was to Virginia Tech, but I know I was.
Well, in Blacksburg, Virginia, what we used to think of when we heard Virginia Tech was great football program, tremendous research and engineering programs as well. That's what Virginia Tech meant. Sadly, that means something different today. Just like the word Columbine doesn't elicit a image in our minds of a pretty wildflower. So things change. Society changes, incidents happen, and it just takes us together, the people, the public, the police, together to look out for one another and to be committed to that. And I have to believe, and I've got good reason to believe, that the good guys have got the bad guys outnumbered thousands of times to one every single day. And those of us who want to look out for one another and keep our families and our neighbors, our classrooms, our workplaces safe are the ones that'll make the difference in what we have for a society, what we have for a country here in America. Additional good news. Earlier in the segment, I talked about Maine, safest state of all 50 in all categories of crime in which to live. And listen, those are the decisions that people make of where do they want to retire? Where do they want to raise their families? I mentioned earlier I worked at the University of Maine, and I can't tell you, because I lost count, the number of students that would leave the University of Maine on graduation day and would head out of state to find their fortune, their fame. But quite often they find their family. They get married. They want to have a child or a family and return to Maine. They boomerang. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They boomerang back here, and that
Maine.
says a lot.
Woot woot.
Listen. That's we have something to offer here, and there's a lot that goes into the recipe of why do we have such low crime.
Yeah.
Often people will ask that, and something else that Maine is notable for of all 50 states, we're the oldest state. By average per capita, our age is higher than any other of the 49 in terms of age, and most offenders will commit crimes between age 15 and 27. According to the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Statistics.gov. And I want to cite my sources whenever I can. And so when we have less young people, and our schools are feeling it, aren't they, Ethan? We're seeing classroom ratios of student to teacher shrinking. Some schools in some municipalities in this very state are closing. They're closing the school building and consolidating schools because there just are not enough students. So our baby boom demographic bubble is shrinking for young people. It's increasing for those age 65 and over. All those things contribute to crime rates. And for better or for worse, it's one of the things that helps the state of Maine be as safe as it is.
I have some quick questions that I think I can ask. And I just want, your take on it. And then I'll move to the next one. Right? We'll rapid fire through these.
Sure.
It's the biggest stereotype that you just want to fix and correct.
Right. You ready?
Oh yeah. The donuts.
The big. Listen, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, the stereotypes, donuts, and and cops. And frankly, I've seen more bran muffins being consumed by police officers, particularly as they get older. But also that cops are, big and bad, and the first person you look for and the last one you want to meet. I would encourage every single listener and viewer of this podcast, make sure they know at least one police officer in their town or their county or in their area on a first name basis. And make a point to build relationships, build those bridges of trust and rapport, because that strengthens the fabric of the community. That reduces the risk of crime or social disorder or fear of crime creeping in. If you know someone that you can call upon. Listen, when you need the cavalry, you call 911 and they come screaming with blue lights and sirens. But in between times, it's an awful good resource to know not only the letter carrier in your area, know the police officer and the person that runs the convenience store or the Irving or the car mechanic. These are all people in our lives. But that stereotype of police being unapproachable, behind mirrored sunglasses, and gosh, you don't want to bother them. Will you please call us? So often I've heard those recordings of a 911 or a police department phone ringing. 911, what's your emergency? Oh, I don't want to bother you. It's probably nothing. But my husband said I should call. Or whatever it is. It's probably nothing but is the common theme. Well, I've been probably watching too much TV or reading too many mysteries, but there's a white van that's down by the playground. And I've seen a man there with a camera taking, it just seems like a lot of pictures. I don't think any of the kiddos are his. And, and this is actually an actual example I'm giving here, Ethan, of that particular call is one of many where we ask, is there any more information you have on that white van? Well, you're probably going to think I'm all paranoid and just, all technicolor in my imagination, but I wrote down the license plate. And what is that, ma'am? And she'll read off the license plate. And I heard this personally, directly myself. Sarge, we've got the plate number of that white van. We've heard about that white van for 10 weeks. We finally have a license plate. And sure enough, that white van and that license plate is registered to a sex offender from out of state.
So don't be scared of cops.
Don't be scared of cops.
Don't be scared of cops.
Call us.
Don't be scared to talk to them.
Give us nothing. Give us nothing. We love nothing. Because you know what? 9 out of 10 times, maybe it is nothing. We're glad to hear from you. And hopefully the experience you have is going to increase your comfort with calling us the next time. And I hope that police officer that pulls you over for whatever that violation was, or you happen to speak with in line at a donut shop or anywhere else, leaves you with an impression. I will tell police officers you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. And that person will tell, in all likelihood, 10 other people, hey, I met a police officer today, or a deputy sheriff, or I met a state trooper today, and his name or her name wasn't that a nice trooper? Wasn't that a nice deputy? And it goes a long way. Sure enough, we represent authority, and we can be intimidating in our presence and our appearance. But without the public, we can't possibly have a prayer of being successful in our work. So that's very important to us, Ethan.
Speaking of traffic stops, what's the worst thing that a person could do at a routine traffic stop? Like, say I'm going 31 and a 25 in Orono, and I get pulled over. I mean, what's the biggest thing I just should not do as a regular person?
Time and again, and we've seen so many videos and examples of a bad interaction between someone and a police officer. I mean, the internet and social media is viral with them. But I often come away with this. Do what the nice police officer says. and I mean that in both, tongue in cheek, but also very seriously. If you're pulled over, be polite and treat that officer the way you would want to be treated, and just wait to hear what the questions are and what the issue is. People who lose their temper, get into hysterics, or go into denial, and gosh, that just exacerbates a situation to a degree that the police officer doesn't know exactly where you're going with this. And that increases the tension and the defensiveness and the stress of the interaction, which shouldn't be stressful. Of course it is. There's blue lights behind you. Every car that's passes, looking to see who got pulled over.
I've been pulled over. I always thought I was going to be the person that got pulled over for the first time at age like 40. Because my mom didn't get pulled over until she was in her, I think, early 50s, late 40s.
That's your good mom, sure.
But I got pulled over. I've been pulled over probably 7 or 8 times.
You rascal.
Never been ticketed.
Okay.
It's always been just like, hey, it's 1 a.m.
Advisory.
Right. It's just been warnings about, hey, you got a light out. Oh, okay. Actually, I know that. I'm heading to VIP right now. I'll give you an escort. Like, it's just been, I've never had an issue.
It's about
with it.
safety is what
But the one thing
is.
I always make sure I do is like both my hands are on the steering wheel so like everybody can see where my hands are at. But that's the only rule that I've had to learn.
All these days, I would say these days, for years, that's always been good advice. And I think that your viewers and listeners will be thinking right now, yep, I keep my hands on the wheel. Some of the viewers and listeners say, I'm sure, that I turn on the interior light and roll the window down. Mm-hmm. I have my license and registration ready, and I'm holding them high on the steering wheel or on the dashboard. I want everything to be as easy as possible. This must be a difficult job. This is an encounter that I want to go well and to end as soon as is reasonably possible. And the more people that appreciate and understand that, I would hope for driver's ed classes and driver's education, books to include. And many, I know this, colleges and universities and many police department websites have a video clip or tips and advice how to conduct yourself when being stopped by the police. Listen, the police are doing their job. They're doing their job on behalf of us. It isn't us versus them. When I say us, it's the public who has asked them to keep our roads safe of drunk drivers and unsafe vehicles, whether they're speeding or have no taillights. Keep us safe because I want my husband, my wife, my kids to get home in the minivan from Christmas shopping at the mall without being crashed into and hurt or killed. And that is the role of the officer, to regulate safety.
Funniest thing that you've encountered?
Funniest.
You can take a moment to think about that.
Everything is relative. It's often said that police and military, they have a lot in common. One of those is called tombstone humor. We think things are funny quite often because it's a stress relief for us to laugh at the ridiculous.
Laughter is the best medicine. It's the best way to decompress.
It's the truth. And whenever I saw this fella get thrown out of a third-story window, and he was 250 pounds, and he was muscle, and she, who threw him out of the third-story window, could not have been even 100 pounds. But mad was she mad. And by gosh, she was just pushing him in the chest, and he was fighting back and forth. There was one of these domestic violence situations, which is absolutely unhealthy. There's nothing funny about it until Henry went out the window. And when I arrived, and here's Henry on West Main Street, on the sidewalk, we all knew Henry, and we all knew Minnie, his spouse. Henry, what happened? She threw me out the window. He had a bump on, he had a goose egg on the back of his head.
Yeah.
I think his elbows were scuffed. Other than that, he's dusting himself off. 3 flights up, Ethan. And this was not the first time. Henry, why on earth did she throw you out the window? Well, I threw a pot of boiling water on her and that made her mad. Henry went off in cuffs, thinking when I arrived there that he was the victim. Turned out that he wasn't. Henry says, I understand, officer, I understand. I brought this on myself. I always do. So, just you got a picture in your mind, just the crazy stuff that you think might come from a comic book or from a Mel Brooks movie. It's based in reality.
All right, last one.
Yes.
Worst, most harrowing day on the job. Right, right. You don't have to go into details, but
Sure.
Like the worst thing that you've had to encounter.
Part of the stress that comes with this profession and also part of the excitement. And part of the thing that draws us to
This was enthusiasm I was not expecting.
No, I know, but I just want to say that, Listen, there are members of the public that will say, well, this is what they signed up for. Nobody signs up for the long list of crap that we end up enduring in this profession, nor would anybody in any job or any career field to the degree that police officers do. However, the excitement of not knowing what's happening next, and to get called 10 or 11 o'clock at night to an unwanted person, a drunk in a bar, to kick him out because he's not listening to the bartender, he won't leave, I need the police to kick this guy out. Well, by the time Joe, another police officer, and I arrived in our police cars, and for some reason, we parked across it. It was a hot summer night. We parked across the street against traffic. There's no traffic. We parked against the opposite lane, right, of traffic, so facing oncoming. And we're exiting our police cars, Joe and I both. We parked right in front and back of each other. We exited onto the sidewalk from our driver's doors, if you can picture that. We're facing the wrong way. We're up against the curb. I'll be darned, this guy had left. He left without the police having to kick him out of the bar. But by the time we had gotten there, he had left, gone to his car, and came back in with a Ruger 22 Magnum rifle, semi-automatic rifle. And he was terrorizing the people. And now as we're arriving and getting out of our cars, the 911 dispatcher is saying, the guy's left, he's back, he's got a gun, and he's threatening people in the bar, just as we're exiting our vehicle and we could see the muzzle flash. It was a hot summer night, like I said, and the front door was open onto the sidewalk, which is on the opposite side of the street. And we saw the flash of the muzzle blasting in our direction, not at patrons or employees of that bar, but at Joe and I. And glass was falling out of the cars that we were driving, our Dodge Diplomat blue and white police cars. This is not in Maine. This is in a different state. And it's interesting. I mentioned earlier we hire our police from the human race. Humans will often sort of freeze in disbelief. What is happening? Fright, flight, freeze. And sure enough, Joe and I both did the same thing. We froze for a minute until it could process in our minds. I mean, not for a minute, for seconds, really. We're hearing boom, boom. Glass is dropping out of our cars. We had be dropping to the sidewalk, and we did. And we got down and took cover, and this guy is shooting up our police cars. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting some stumble bum drunk.
Yeah.
And Joe and I, both in our 20s, we're going to shuffle this guy out of here, maybe even give him a ride home, but solve the problem for that business. The problem got substantially worse by the time we arrived, clearly.
Mm.
And then he ran through the bar, out the back door, through the kitchen, out the back door, and ran up the hill, up the back. And we didn't know if he was in there, we didn't know if he was going. We didn't know that at the time. But when we called in, shots fired. Every police car in the city, there were about 16 of us total. The other 14 were heading our way, plus a couple of detectives. And sure enough, here's a detective who comes down the hill, knew the city very well. He parked up on the upper street, starts walking on the hill, and here's this guy huffing and puffing, running up the sidewalk with a rifle. And he arrested him at gunpoint. No one was hurt. But I want you to know, Ethan, my heart was in my mouth. I'm a young 20-year-old, and I'm 20-something-year-old, probably 28, and I'm thinking, I wonder if this calling is what I thought it was. And maybe I should be a pharmacist like my father.
Did your dad want you to be a pharmacist?
No, interestingly, my father did not want me to be a pharmacist, particularly owning my own drugstore and working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, as so often was the case. But, he was a World War II combat medic in Europe and a liberator of concentration camps, something I never knew, that he was under George Patton in World War II. I didn't know this until he was 90 years old the year before he passed away. Well, my dad did tell me that the training I went through as a police officer for my police academy basic training, he attended my graduation. He said that was tougher than what I went through to get ready for World War II. And I really respect what you're doing. I can't tell you.
That must have been a hell of a moment.
Yeah, the importance of validation and support from, listen, this is greatest generation stuff from my dad who never said I love you. I knew he did. He showed me in a million ways, but you don't do that from the family. He's a first-generation American of immigrant parents, and they were very stoic. But to hear that from my dad was pretty remarkable, and maybe that helped fuel my passion for the calling, that I was doing the right thing because I had his blessing and his respect. Choked up now, aren't you?
There was more in that glass.
A little bit. That's right. There's some emotion with that.
Well, as I finish and spill my drink on myself, it will symbolize it as the end of the conversation.
Sure.
It was really nice talking to you, but there's one more thing that we need to figure out.
Do so. What on earth?
We got to figure out whether or not
you see, so right. So
got to figure out whether or not you got better.
And what's the rule after one drink or one stiff drink?
It's been a stiff drink technically during the sponsorship. I poured you a second one.
Does anyone need to know what my preference is?
No one needs to know.
So
if you want to say, you're welcome.
I'll just give the initials G and T, so people don't really know.
Yeah.
I'll just do that.
Goose and Tom from Top Gun.
Right on. And
so all you got to do is beat 5.
Well, I've got the need for speed now that you said that, and
all you got to do is make it look closer than you had.
Okay, you're watching. Are you with me? Are you rooting? Probably not, but here we go. And
he's going so much faster.
I was watching Ethan earlier, and I saw that there were colors that were actually blended, colors I'd never seen before. The purple and was made of blue and red, and the green was made of blue and yellow, like a tidy bowl.
You got 5 on the red right there. You got 5.
Okay,
you got 5 whites.
I got 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5.
Dude, look at that.
I got 5s
in 28 seconds.
And I'm done.
In 28 seconds, you got the. And this T right here is actually a very important symbol in solving the Rubik's Cube.
Because it's time to say goodnight.
Yeah, you gotta get that T on 4 sides in order to solve the Rubik's Cube.
Well, I'm impressed and
look at that.
Pleased to have been invited to be on your Boondock Perspective show here, Ethan. Thanks so much. Thanks to everybody who saw fit to tune in and stay with us.
Yeah, I'd like to give you an opportunity to plug what you want to plug. At the end of every episode, you get the opportunity to kind of talk about yourself or promote what you want to promote. So is there anything you want to promote?
Just one thing, and it's important to me now. Listen, I've been a player for nearly 40 years. Now I'm a coach. And today I'm an instructor on the faculty full-time in justice studies at the University of Maine at Augusta. So today, members of the public, members of the police profession, corrections officers, anyone who has an interest in this profession that I've committed myself to for the past, often 39 years, 39.5 years. You can take courses now at the University of Maine at Augusta, Justice Studies, at www.uma.edu. And I hope to see some folks signing up to take a course from Noel March and any one of the other faculty members. They're terrific. And so this is going to be the next chapter of my career. Training and teaching, and hopefully offering some enlightenment to others in this important role that we have with the police of the public.
It's a very respectable direction to be going with your career. It was really nice having you on the podcast. I'm happy we were finally able to make this happen.
Absolutely. Likewise, Ethan. Thank you.
Remember, on top of being available for your viewing pleasure on YouTube, you can also download the show for free on iTunes and Spotify. Add the Boondock Perspective on Facebook for sneak peeks and highlights. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Deuces.